If this is centered, I'm just gonna do my best. Hi again, long time no see. Hi, I'm Grace. I am a senior here at Harvard studying computer science and neuroscience with a concurrent master's in computer science. And these are the 7 best books that I read this year. And hopefully you find something in this list that you like. And please give me suggestions down below too, because yeah, I'm always trying to get out of a reading slump. The first one, the best one by far, was definitely The Worlds I See by Fei Fei Li. I'm honestly so mad at myself that I didn't read this book sooner, because it was published in 2023, so I could have had this in my brain like a year ago. But it just does a fantastic job of mapping out her incredible journey from like an immigrant child from China to the one of like the leaders, the biggest leaders in AI now. For context, she got a full ride scholarship to Princeton. And she was initially studying physics and then found the field of computer vision and artificial intelligence, specifically research using large data sets to train models at the time. And her like particular insight in this field was like ImageNet, and the idea that maybe these models, what makes them incredible isn't like the algorithm specifically, but just the size of data. That was potentially like the turning factor, and it was the case. She walks you through a personal storytelling take of how this field was revolutionized by this particular insight, and how she herself sees the future of AI looking. It's a really great journey through AI, so highly recommend it for that purpose. Second book on my list is Nexus by Yuval Noah Harari. This is the same guy who wrote Sapiens, Homo Deus. Nexus is an incredible inquiry on what it means for information to shape reality. Specifically, he starts with a question of like, what is information? For example, if I'm speaking to you in a language that you don't understand, am I actually conveying any information? And then he moves on to, is more information always good? And he has this great printing press analogy with how, most people think that the printing press was the reason why technological advancements could accelerate at that time. But then you can also look at its negative effects, such as being one of the only reasons why the witch hunt trials were like taken place. And then he builds on that one step forward to say that more information can actually shape reality. So information creates reality, and not the common idea that more information discovers reality. And then he grounds it in like, okay, what does this mean for our like super AI heavy world? Specifically, does this mean that like information generated from these models that are fictitious, for example, or just contain biases can change our reality? I think it's one of the best pessimistic AI books that's grounded actually in our history and like offers a sense of realistic pessimism instead of just like scaring you, for example. It's incredibly salient. I think one of the best like advocates for AI safety actually. So I highly recommend this book if it sounds like something you'd be interested in. The third one on this list is Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey. This is such a fun book. Definitely a lot lighter than the first 2 that I mentioned. It's mainly about his life growing up in rural Texas, and then becoming like a massive movie star. I think like the biggest piece from this that's like most incredible to me is he's able to throw in all of these like witty one-liners, like keeping it relative, for example, or like life is about, what is it? Life is about getting lucky and giddy up, something like that. Essentially, he like has done a bunch of like, he's written journals all of his life, and what's crazy is if you look at interviews that ask him questions that are similar to what's in his book. For example, how did you meet his wife? He might have answered it in an interview like 6 years ago, but I swear to God, it is word for word what's in the book. This man is just like super consistent across his interviews. I think it's like none of it feels fictitious, if you know what I mean, and it walks through his whole career. And his like sense of authenticity with living life. I think that's really the biggest takeaway that you get from this book, which is how to live like an exciting life for yourself. You learn how to live authentically, how he lives authentically, how he goes on these like retreats to like rediscover himself and whatnot. Highly recommend. It's laugh out loud funny, so fast to get through, and just like, especially if you get it on audiobook form, I think it's just like a great source of entertainment that like sticks with you and like provides a lot of cognitive stimulus as well. Fourth book on this list is Burn Book by Tara Swisher, I think. Oh, Kara Swisher. Sorry about that. I discovered this book because I was listening to a Hard Fork podcast where Kara Swisher was the guest, and she was so funny that I was like looking for all other media that she'd published, and this book was one of them. Essentially, it marks her experience as a journalist, jumping on the whole tech phase, and then becoming really close confidants to a lot of the big giants in tech today. For example, like she documents her, relationship, interviewing with him, meeting with Elon Musk, and since the very early beginning days, and she just has incredibly witty, cutting, and like insightful commentary on all of these tech giants. She really feels like not just a critic but actually a player in the arena, which I think is a really hard take to get from a lot of tech publishers nowadays. So her book is just almost like an expose of like the tech world, from the view of a real insider, and it's just like pretty incredibly done. Also super witty, really entertaining, and pretty insightful too. Next up on the list is The Women, by Kristen Hanna. This is like a pretty different tone from all the other books. It's a historical fiction. Specifically, it talks about the Vietnam War and the role that nurses played during the Vietnam War. It's, first person storytelling of this girl who, signs up for the Vietnam War because of the perceived honor she thought she'd be bringing onto her family, but she's kind of slapped in the face with the reality that for women to go to war isn't an honor for her family. Nevertheless, she like finds herself out there, establishes herself, kicks ass, does really well, and then when she's called back again, she's slapped in the face with the reality that like her work isn't just not appreciated, but isn't even acknowledged. And then she's gone through a life experience that's so different from the beaten track that she feels like she can't actually fit into society anymore. I think this feeling of like alienation from society is something that everyone feels to some extent when they go through a career change or they just go off the beaten path. And I think her journey is like almost a predictive consolation of what that experience is going to be like for anyone who like pursues their dreams, that like, someone will understand, obviously to a lesser degree than to go like get PTSD for war. But it's incredibly well done, and it like really opened up the doors of like exploring the Vietnam War. I think it's a fantastic book, and it will really I think it'll change your life, honestly. Sixth book on this list, Moonwalking with Einstein. This one was a really fun one. This one is almost like, in my head, it's pretty Atomic Habits adjacent. It's less so like self-help and more so just like interesting practical science. While I was reading this book, it basically talks about the amazing attributes of spatial memory and how you can utilize like human brain's ability to understand spatial memory to memorize a deck of cards, for example. And this book, I think if you put it into practice, is like pretty life-changing. So as I was reading the book, I learned the techniques to memorize a deck of cards, and now with a little bit of prep, I can memorize a deck of cards. It also just connected a lot of the concepts that I was learning in neuroscience about spatial awareness into something that was like really practical, which in this case is a memory palace. It's a concept that I'd always heard of being helpful in the past, but I really implemented it while reading this book. And I think like for that reason, it's pretty life-changing. It gives you this like really weird ability to analyze your own brain, if that makes sense. So like it'll talk about a technique, you can try it out, and then you're almost discovering new abilities that you didn't know your brain had. It's a super fun book. I think it's like, yeah, it just like makes you see your brain in a different way, which is, pretty incredible. And then the last one on this list is Brave New World by Sal Khan. He's the founder of Khan Academy, the edtech platform that we've probably all used while growing up. And he just provides this really amazing insight into what artificial intelligence can do for learning. Specifically, he talks about his like experience playing with GPT. I think it was 4.0 or just 4, while the world had still not seen 3.5. And he talks about how he realized that, holy crap, this is going to change the world of edtech. And then also imagines a world where like your storybooks can talk back. So think about children, reading storybooks, reading Harry Potter, for example, and then being able to talk and converse with Harry Potter to ask like why he did X, Y, Z. I think the example he gave in particular was Gatsby. So yeah, it's just a pretty colorful world of like what talking back ed tech material would look like, told by, you know, one of the greats in ed tech. So really worthwhile if you're interested in the ed tech space at all. Those are definitely my top 7 books of the year. They're all pretty different in terms of tone, but they are ranked. So I would recommend like looking for the book that interests you from first to 7th, if that makes sense. So if you're looking for something that's really tech focused, The Worlds I See, definitely best one. If you're looking for something that's like more informative, then it would be the second one on the list, Nexus. And then if you're looking for something like lighthearted and fun, then Green Lights is the perfect one to go. So those are my favorite books. If you have any suggestions, please leave them down below. I'm always looking for books, always looking to get out of a slump. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, found something helpful, and I'll see you next year.